All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited for today's panel discussion. As some of you know, October is ADHD Awareness Month. This is a topic that is very near and dear to us at Reviving Veterinary Medicine. And so I am really, really excited to dig into all of this information with everyone today, alongside my panelists here. So interestingly, the theme of ADHD Awareness Month this year is the Many Faces of ADHD, and really is an invitation to recognize just how diverse the experiences are of individuals living with ADHD and how many different individuals can experience this. And so this is why we have collected our panelists. They come from very different facets of veterinary medicine, different parts of the world, different roles, and we're here to share with you what the experiences have been. So without further ado, we hope that you will gain some insights, maybe some coping strategies, some information about accommodations in the workplace, and really at the end of the day, just really embracing how neurodiversity can enhance our teams and then ultimately, of course, our patient care. So I am going to open it up to our panelists to each introduce themselves briefly, and then we will get into the questions. Again, for those of you who are watching, please feel welcome to put your questions in the Q&A. As the moderator, I will be watching for those questions. We've got a whole bunch of questions that we've already collected that we'll be posing to everyone, and we will go from there. Okay, so I am going to begin with Helen. Helen, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everybody, please.
Yes. Hi, everybody. So I'm a veterinary surgeon. I was in clinical practice for 15 years, did 3 years of mixed practice initially, and then went into a really big charity hospital, a small animal charity hospital for 12 years. Went into leadership as well, and really enjoyed doing that. And then a couple of years ago, left clinical practice and I set up my business called the Vet Project. And we run training and workshops for neurodivergent people in the veterinary sector, which is really fun. And I am also the ADHD coach for Reviving Veterinary Medicine, which is fab.
Thanks, Helen. Janine.
My name is Janine Calabro. I am a small animal clinical veterinarian. I'm a criticalist. I was in the specialty world for a long time. I've been with Veterinary Emergency Group since last winter. I'm a medical director. I think my story is probably somewhat familiar to potentially some of you. I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. I think as a girl who academically did okay during the 80s when I was in elementary school, I kind of cruised under the radar for a long time, and had myself evaluated and diagnosed after my son was diagnosed when he was in first grade. So ADHD I'm relatively newly aware that this has been part of my experience for a long time. And I'm really excited to be participating in this panel.
We're so glad you're here, Janine. Thank you so much. Galina, last but not least.
Yay! I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. I have a very long and divergent career as well as being neurodivergent. And also, like Janine, also diagnosed late in life, actually after I retired from clinical practice. So I started out as a veterinary technician in Canada, and I went back to school as a veterinarian. I worked in way different types of practices, emergency, small animal. I was in 2009 when I graduated, I was given a equine practice because of the economic situation at the time. So anyways, long varied career, long story short, I'm in Costa Rica after severe burnout. And I'm also a certified veterinary acupuncturist. So after thinking I would never do veterinary medicine again, I'm actually working as a certified veterinary acupuncturist here for my local community. So this is what I offer as far as my veterinary services. And I have been also hosting veterinary well-being retreats here in my little neck of the woods. Marie was actually one of my associate professors when I was in vet school. And then she's also done we've done a well-being retreat together as well. So it's anyways, it's been a long journey, and I was diagnosed actually when my husband has ADHD as well. So he was the one who actually pushed me towards getting my diagnosis, and really it explained a lot, including my various roles in veterinary medicine, which I guess we'll get into once we start discussing it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I love that. And Galina, yes, I have just so enjoyed our time that we've been able to spend together, especially in Costa Rica. I do hope that we can come visit you again sometime soon. You lead into this really, really well in terms of the first question that I have for you specifically, Galina. You mentioned how ADHD, has shown up for you. How do you think that ADHD manifests uniquely in veterinary professionals compared to perhaps people in other fields?
Yes, thanks, Marie. Yeah, I think we definitely do have a unique perspective on this because I think a lot of us are very high functioning, or like Janine said, you do well in school, so you kind of fly under the radar. Being, also in school in the 80s and the 90s, it really wasn't something that you even like. It was just coming to light at that point. And I also had dyslexia, I remember, so it was really quite a struggle through school. But when you're smart and also having to live with ADHD without knowing it, you kind of think that you were stupid in some cases. So I think a lot of times with our profession, because of our perfectionism as well, sometimes we can look at our ADHD sort of negatively that way because of our role. It like the way that this profession puts us in these roles. Also, I found when I was working more so as a veterinarian than a technician, although I did struggle with certain things that I now know were ADHD related, I didn't really see it as much until I was in the veterinarian role. And that really came to light when I started doing surgery, timing between appointments. Like sometimes, with ADHD, sometimes you're going from one thing to the next, right? Like very quickly, and other times you're kind of going down this rabbit hole. So I found that I was fluctuating between those two sort of states. So surgery was great because I could just sort of focus and then go and get that hyper focus that you get with ADHD. But appointments I struggled with because oh my gosh, 10-15 minutes, that's not enough time. I can't jump that fast. So it was, and there was no reset time either. So I found that like there's a lot of benefits to having ADHD in our profession because of the uniqueness of the fact that, yeah, we are seeing different things, like our the puppy appointment versus the next one that's got chronic kidney disease. Like you're constantly refocusing. So I think that's how it sort of manifests uniquely in our profession. But it also highlights the way that if we can sort of develop skills and understand that we have it, we can actually use it as a superpower. So that's my
I
2
love
cents.
that. Yeah, no, that's great. And I love the specific examples that you shared because I think a lot of individuals will be able to identify that, right? Like there's, and what I heard from Janine as well, it seems to ring so true for so many individuals. It's like, you're still getting good grades and everything else, and you're able to compensate, so to speak, and so it gets missed. And then later in life, when you get diagnosed, it's like, oh my gosh, this explains so much about some of these challenges that I've had. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice if everyone could be have that information sooner. I know for me, I've been having significant challenges with my daughter as she started school, mostly from a psycho-emotional perspective. But one of her teachers has strongly recommended that I get her assessed. And of course, her father is a donor. And so I don't know whether it wasn't disclosed, whether he had been diagnosed, and he was young when he donated. So it may be that he wasn't diagnosed either until later in life, but I'll be interested to see how that shapes better understanding her behaviors and most importantly, how to support her. Janine, I'm wondering if you can share additionally your personal experiences about how ADHD has influenced your work, positively or negatively. You and I both, are criticalists. We're in the emergency and critical care space. It's very high intensity. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think that it definitely has had huge benefits and some real challenges. So I think for the positives, pattern recognition and creative problem solving are two really big ones. I think ADHD brains are often really good at recognizing subtle patterns, which can be hugely helpful with complicated diagnostic workups. I may notice things that other people may not. Creative problem solving, I think, is helpful in the ER sphere because sometimes you have to MacGyver things, and sometimes it can be helpful for practicing a long spectrum of care, trying to figure out a creative way where we can come up with a plan that's the best for this patient and this family at this time in this situation, given any complexities or constraints that are placed upon that situation. I think many ADHDers are also very empathetic, which can help us to forge bonds with clients pretty quickly, sometimes in high stakes emotional settings, and get them to trust us quickly. And I think that the fast pace and dynamic caseload aligns with some of our dopamine seeking tendencies as well. Um, Hyperfocus can be a double-edged sword. I joke sometimes that I can use it for good or for evil. I can put time and energy into a task or into a patient or a client, and the world can be exploding around me, and I may not even notice if that's holding my attention, which can be really helpful sometimes. But hyperfocus can also exacerbate the next traits that I'll mention, which are time optimism and time blindness. So for time optimism, I can sometimes underestimate the amount of time that might be needed to complete a task, which when coupled with people-pleasing tendencies, which I have as well, sometimes that can lead me to take on, one more thing, thinking, sure, I can do this, when in fact it's a real struggle to get it done in the time allotted. Time blindness, I don't really love that term because it's kind of an ableist term, but I'm not really sure how else to describe it. And that's, sometimes I don't sense that time is passing in the same way that a neurotypical person might. So particularly if I'm hyper focused, I'm like doing this thing, and sometimes much more time has elapsed than I had planned or allotted for, which can make it hard to meet deadlines. And sometimes there are also some time horizon misperceptions where I think of time as now or not now, and that can sometimes make planning for the future and meeting deadlines a little bit hard. And I think many of us who have ADHD also have tendencies to overwork, which may be compensatory for making up for some of the challenges that we experience. And that can sometimes make time management a little bit harder as well.
Yeah, wow. It's so much when I hear you talk about it, and thank you for breaking it down so eloquently because you highlighted, I think, things that so many people are, wrestling with as well. Catherine says, I feel that overextending and then losing track of time in the ER is a huge struggle. And I sometimes feel like I'm crushing the day and then see that I've only seen like 4 cases and I'm like, where did it all go? And then there's some shame related to that. And I think that's like you said, Janine, where the overcompensation can come in. It's like, especially when you do have that people pleasing tendency, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, I'll take all the rest of the cases that come in, like don't worry about it. And which can not always be helpful as well. Um, Janine, I think you highlighted a lot of, the positive impacts as well. What strengths do you think that you've discovered in yourself specifically pertaining to ADHD, and how has that benefited? I feel like you touched on this a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on there?
Um, yeah, I think probably resilience and determination were the first things that came to mind, particularly since I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my mid 40s. I had to deal with so many challenges and setbacks over the years and figure out how to pick up and move on. I'm also really stubborn, which might have been helpful there too. But I think perseverance with tasks that can feel really daunting is probably a big one for me. I think a big scale example of that would be getting through my residency and passing the ACVEC boards, like a really high stakes, expensive, terrible experience to go through. Um, and particularly without testing accommodations, which I absolutely would have been entitled to had I been diagnosed earlier in my career. But I think, there are smaller scale examples that come up more frequently as well, like dealing with client complaints or adverse patient events or like operational challenges in our hospital or any of just the day-to-day challenges that we all encounter in daily practice.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to those creativity and those problem-solving capacities, right? Find, really find things that other people may not see, right? So that's really wonderful. And I love that we can focus on the positive and not certainly harp on the negative. That said, I think there are challenges. And Galina, I'm interested to hear from you in terms of what specific challenges you feel like you faced in the veterinary environment. I know that some of these challenges might have even have been what led you to leave routine clinical practice, and how do you manage those now, even as a practitioner of acupuncture?
Yes, and I think Janine actually touched on a lot of the challenges as well, because I mean, you need to have the challenge to have the strength, right? You develop skills, you develop ways that you compensate for things. And I completely agree 100% with with Janine's what she was saying about the whole surgery rabbit hole, being more empathetic, losing complete track of time. I think those are definitely the challenges, because our days are so structured in regular clinical practice. So unless you can make it like unless you can do it like you're only doing surgery, or you're only doing one thing sort of at a time, it almost makes it easier to kind of help yourself to structure the day. I think like Janine said as well, the rabbit hole thing can be for good or for evil, right? So I happened to because I was always over time on the appointments. I would always take on more surgery because I was really fast and efficient and good. I had and everyone else would take forever. So on my surgery days, I would basically have 14 surgeries, but only 4 appointments on the appointment days because I was so slow. So, because I would actually use my superpower of ADHD with the empathy for those client communications, and then all of a sudden 30 minutes later I'm like, oh, I'm in trouble again, because again with the people pleasing tendencies that I also had. I think that contributed to the burnout in a lot of ways, because yes, you're compensating for the things that you think you are lacking by overdoing it in the areas that you can contribute. So in a lot of ways that kind of sets you up, unless you take care of yourself and understand that that's what you're doing, and find some sort of balance or some skills or some strategies, that you at least have control over that situation and it's not controlling you. Then I think you end up kind of in my position where after burnout you realize that this has been the case all along, and oh, maybe if I had done this, or maybe you know if I knew then what I know now, type of thing. And sure, a diagnosis would have been really helpful, but I guess with that's getting into more like skills and strategies for it. But I think a lot of us are very good at strategizing our own, like trying to figure that out on our own even. So it would be really certainly helpful, because I think also one of our challenges is asking for help and acknowledging that this is, it's not a, I'm not going to say it's a problem, because it's not a problem, it's not even a condition. I think it's just a different way that your brain works. So it's recognizing that that may be the challenge, is understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, this is just how your brain works. So how do you make it work for yourself in what you've chosen to do, like in your chosen career?
I love that. And, that dovetails nicely into the next question that I wanted to ask you, Galina, is what strategies or accommodations do you feel would have been helpful for you in managing your ADHD symptoms at work? And obviously now you have this information, so you can enact those as needed, and especially because you're self-employed, you can you can really craft how your work is. But tell us more about now, with this information that you have, how have you changed the way you work? And if you could go back, what accommodations would have been helpful for you?
Yeah, I think probably a year 2 after graduation, I kind of started to understand that I would have to make accommodations for myself because working, after after the equine practice, I sold that. I lived in Toronto for a while, so I was working in, just regular general practice as an employee, and I realized quite quickly that in a lot of ways that wasn't working for me. So what was I going to do? So I think one of the strategies that I kind of wish I had implemented earlier, but I started to, and now I do it all the time. But honestly, lists, like just having lists so that I would have, and sometimes I would start making lists for my list so that I wouldn't feel overwhelmed by a task, right? So it's like, okay, I have this list. No, too many things. Okay, go back, go back to even further, go back to step one and take it in small steps. So I found that if I could do that, and a lot of environments wouldn't let me do that, which is why I kind of, I actually ended up transitioning to locum. Like I worked as a locum for most of my veterinary career because I could control, I had more control over my time, my hours, what I wanted to do as well. So I found that was helpful, and having, kind of the lists really helped break things down for me. Also, getting kind of a system. So having, like consistency, right? So having a routine, I find very helpful for my ADHD, that I know, okay, I may not be able to control my day as a veterinarian, but I can control how I go into work, like what I do before I go in, what I do, during the time that I'm there to help reset myself emotionally and mentally. And actually, funny enough, I learned that when I was going through at OVC at vet school, through a stress class that they offered. It was like a full body scan. So I found that that was one of the things that I used, especially in emergency medicine. I'd go to the bathroom, the the once in 12 hours that I would let myself go, but then I would also breathe. Like I would use that as a reset to try and, refocus myself, because I'd feel myself kind of spinning out sometimes with, it's like when you have too many tasks and then you don't know what to focus on, especially in emergency medicine. Um, yeah, like you don't know what to focus on first. So I would use those little time slots to try and reset myself and reset my brain. So that was a strategy as well. Um, Also, what I ended up doing was obviously focusing on specific areas of interest. So traditional Chinese medicine, that also gave me more time with my clients, which was great because, typical appointment was not 10, 15 minutes. It was like an hour and a half. I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I need for me to be able to, do my veterinary work the way that I need to, with the way my brain is wired. So I was trying to, figure that out. Unfortunately, by the time I actually figured it out to the level where I could have used it to help myself, I was already like in that burnout mode. I was like, kind of beyond. So I needed to take time off. So that's actually what I did. So sometimes even like alone time, giving yourself the time to reset. And again, with the, kind of the people pleasing tendencies, it's really hard to convince yourself that you need that self care time. But I think, like, especially with ADHD, you do really need that to reset your brain so that you can actually focus and not be overwhelmed. So again, that was kind of like inadvertent strategy that I was able to get back to medicine by and getting out of, sort of that burnout mode. It involved obviously more than that, but I think if I had understood before that and started, with those strategies I was starting to implement, I think I probably could have avoided the burnout, honestly, looking back on it. So I just wanted to put that piece in as well.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from everybody is that the sooner that they had this awareness, call it a diagnosis, what have you, of knowing how your brain works and what it needs, the better things can be, because then we can, as you did, focus on your strengths, do what feels more in alignment with how your brain works, and ask for those accommodations. Like in Janine's case, writing the board exam, I mean, Janine was able to pass, and it's an incredibly hard exam. But for those, there will be many individuals that can really benefit from having more time or having that quiet space to breathe, to reset, to do what they need to do, whatever it is that is needed. I'm going to turn it over to Helen now. Helen, as an ADHD coach, as someone also who lives with ADHD, you've got a lot of experience working with individuals with ADHD, and working with communities and practices and helping others. I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit as well. And I know you and I have had this conversation separately on the podcast about accommodations, and I know that it can look very different for everyone. Can you speak to any other strategies, maybe not mentioned by Galina, that you've seen might be helpful and or are worth people considering for their ADHD way of thinking?
Yeah, you're right. And I'm really passionate about us figuring out our own strategies and using coaching to do that. As a late diagnosed, as you say, ADHD and myself, it takes a while to figure out what you need and what you want and what your traits are and what they're not. But yeah, technology, I think we're using more and more. So Galina mentioned lists, and I really like that. Breaking things down, you mentioned as well, but there's some great AI tools that you can use to do that, and just to break it into a first step. So I think task initiation is one thing that we can struggle with, and so breaking it down into a first step that we can manage. And if I don't have to break it down into that first step myself, perfect. If a computer can do it for me, then that's great. So AI to do that can be useful. But other uses of AI, definitely things like consult note takers and things like that can be a massive time saver. And yeah, certainly looking after regulating yourself, emotional regulation is a massive thing that we struggle with. And Glenn talked about breathing, but any kind of mindfulness. And what I often recommend people to try and do is if you only get to go to the toilet every 12 hours, that's a bit of a problem. So how can we weave that into our day? Like how can we bring those mindful moments into our day? So is it when we're washing our hands after every consult, because we do that quite often, and the same if we're in surgery. So what is it that we can use in our day to kind of bring ourselves into the moment and make our day more sustainably kind of level, I guess.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. I have some other questions to ask you, Helen, as well, with regards to team dynamics, but I want to back up because Susanna has written a really important question that maybe a lot of people are asking themselves that I want to pose to the panel. And Helen, you might be the best person to answer this because I know you've navigated this process with individuals who have not yet been diagnosed. Susanna shares or asks, so your advice would be to go to a psychiatrist and get diagnosed. So I know that I am or not ADHD, because I see that some people have opinion that the diagnosis doesn't matter. I'm 26 years old and people tend to tell me it won't change anything. You won't get different care in work or school. And so to put this in perspective, Susanna is a vet student in the Czech Republic, watching from the very north of Sweden, doing their 5-month internship there at the clinic. So that's a little bit about Susanna. What advice would you give, Helen?
Yeah, really, it's really personal whether you want to get diagnosed or not. And I think there's financial limitations sometimes to that. There's waiting list limitations, certainly in the UK where I am. For me and for a lot of the people that I talk to, diagnosis has been hugely valuable. And I think people worry about labeling themselves or labeling their children, if that's what they're looking at. For me, it's not a label. I think label has a negative connotation, and that is not what it is. For me, it's about self-knowledge and then being able to navigate your traits and figure out what you need. Having said that, you don't need a diagnosis to do that either. So I think start the process. If you think you have ADHD, then that might well be the case. So how about if there is a long waiting list and that sort of thing, then look into, I have pre-diagnosis clients that I coach as well. So look into figuring yourself out. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I shared the link for your coaching with Susanna as well, and I'll pop that in the chat as well for everybody. Jodine mentions lovely comment. Actually, there's quite a few people with opinions about diagnosis here. Jodine says the diagnosis absolutely mattered for me. I don't get or want special accommodations, but it has given me the ability to give myself a little grace. I am such a firm believer in the more you know about yourself, the more you can ask yourself, the more you can forgive yourself, the more compassionate you can be with yourself. You know, I have a neurotypical brain, but I have a lot of other challenges. You know, I live with significant mental health challenges that require day-to-day management on my part. And just knowing that about myself, it helps me to recognize what I need. It helps me to give myself compassion when things are really challenging for me. It just helps me navigate through the world as a better human, just having that self-knowledge. Catherine says, for me, I felt my diagnosis was freeing and that it removed some of the shame from my struggles. As Helen says, the self-knowledge has allowed me to figure out how to manage. I was lucky though, and my MD was open to doing it herself with system assessment and medication trial. So I guess I never saw an actual psychologist or psychiatrist in that case. I'm going to ask another question from Bianca, which I think relates into this conversation, which is, what advice can you give for individuals already diagnosed with ADHD who are applying to vet school? In my case, I personally fear not being able to manage the heavy workload, burnout, and work-life balance. I've worked at a clinic for 9 years as an ACA, and I know I have a passion for helping animals, and I don't want to let my ADHD discourage me from pursuing this career. Um, I don't know who might, Janine, maybe you feel called to answer that?
Yeah, I think as Galena mentioned, I think lists can be hugely helpful. I should back up. I think self-knowledge and self-advocacy are going to be the basis there. So I think spending some time, whether it's independently or with a coach, or I'm in a group coaching setting personally, and which I found to be really helpful. I think spending some time learning about yourself and figuring out how to help yourself, I think is the first step. I think being a good advocate for yourself as well, whether that's ensuring that you have appropriate accommodations if you're entitled to them and you want to go that route as far as like testing and that sort of thing is concerned, or advocating for your own self-care steps that you need to take in order to have some time to decompress and recharge so that you can bring your best self to school every day. And I think figuring out if it's, I find checklists really helpful. Checklists or other mechanisms so that you can chunk your work into smaller pieces so that it feels less daunting. I think that for students would be hugely beneficial as well. And remembering to move and like eat food that's good for you, and particularly focusing on the types of food that can be good for your brain, like ensuring that you're getting good, healthy fats. Yeah, I think those are the first things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, it's some great advice. And, you know, Bianca, I would say that there are a number of veterinary students and veterinarians who are living with ADHD and are still excelling in the profession, as you can see from the people on our panel, from the people who are commenting in the chat. So it absolutely is possible. I wouldn't let that discourage you. And I will just echo the advice that, you know, that I have witnessed from coaching clients that I've had and others, is that the sooner you can get in touch with a coach or a support system that can help you figure out what strategies will work best for you, because everybody is so different. It's about finding what works for you and your brain the way that your brain works. And then you can just be incredible in this amazing profession. So please don't let that discourage you. Galena, you've got your hand up.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to comment on that because I feel like I understand Bianca's question, being a veterinary technician for 11 years before going back to vet school. And one of the most daunting things was, oh my God, how am I going to pass these tests? How am I going to absorb all this information? It was very overwhelming even just to think about it, even though I knew obviously my passion was, in the veterinary field as a nurse. So I think the first step for me was understanding that like to be positive about it. Like you're smart and you have this passion. So recognize that and just understand that there's just going to be other strategies that you need to learn and skills, and you're going to be doing it different. You can do it, you're just not going to do it like everybody else necessarily. So what does that look like for you? So that should be the first step, not questioning whether you can do it in the first place. It's more like, how do I do this? Because this is what my calling is. So, and I think that was a huge shift in perspective that made me really start looking for those skills and those techniques, and how am I going to do this? And one of them was actually taking scuba diving during, as a reset. So maybe, yeah, like having that physical. I think for ADHD, it's also very important not to just get bogged down in the mind and the school part. Like, it's actually having some kind of a physical distraction or physical activity that you can focus on as well. So that would be my advice as well, that you can do it, and how do I do it? That's it.
Thank you, Zoom. It says you are muted. Such great sentiments from everybody. I really can't emphasize enough, as an advocate for mental health and wellness, we need neurodiversity in veterinary medicine. Like, there are I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about all of my, neuroatypical, neurospicy, whatever individuals want to be identified as, colleagues and friends in this profession that have such an incredible way of thinking about things and problem solving. We're going through some challenges in vet medicine, and we need to come up with some creative solutions. And so we need individuals in the profession that can think creatively and can look at things differently. That is the beauty of, one of the beautiful things about having an ADHD brain. I want to circle back and ask Helen a question, and then I can see that there's more coming up in the chat and in the Q&A here. But while I'm sifting through those, Helen, can you talk about this from like a team dynamics perspective? Because we can hear this on the positive and the negative in practice as well. Like, sometimes when individuals do get accommodations in the workplace, there will be, a misunderstanding or a lack of awareness about what that means and why they need it. How do you feel that ADHD can have an impact on teams, and what can team members do to help improve understanding and collaboration? Like, how can they show support for individuals on their team who have ADHD and need that support?
Yeah, I think the first thing is we need neurodiversity. As you said, Maria, I love that you said that, and thank you so much, because it's so true and lovely to hear it. And I think as a team member, educating yourself is the first and the most important thing. If you can understand about neurodiversity, if you can know about the different traits, then that brings compassion, essentially. And I think if you're a leader and you've got a neurodivergent person that you're trying to lead, take time to discover, your any person, their unique traits. Get some training for yourself. There's training out there on neurodiversity for veterinary leaders. There's training for teams. I think knowledge is power. The more you know about it, the more you can kind of adapt your mindset. And we often, one of the things that comes up often when we're talking about team dynamics is communication. I think that's a biggie. Neurodivergent people do often communicate differently to neurotypical people. That's it can be like, and this isn't my analogy, but I love it, like a PC trying to talk to a Mac. It's different operating systems, and sometimes they don't talk to each other very effectively, so it can be tricky. There's it's differences in communication. We can argue about whether PCs or Macs are better, but nobody's right, are they? We're not talking about pathology here. We're talking about differences. So some people prefer more direct communication, but in a team setting that can come across as blunt sometimes. And if you do have somebody that wants and likes to communicate in a blunt way, and they might want to be communicated back in that kind of clear way, if as their colleague, I know that the intention behind that kind of blunt way of speaking is not I'm angry with you, or I'm mad at you, or whatever. If I've had that education and I understand that, then I can bring some compassion to that and think, oh, that this person that's just how they are. They're being blunt, and you don't have to take it so personally then. So I do think education brings compassion, and that is the key for me.
Yeah, so this leads so well into a question posed by Jodine in the Q&A. Jodine says, I'm finding it difficult to find a way to get through to the more traditionalist team members, mostly vets, ex-co-owners, that the culture is no longer bear down and get it done no matter what, or say yes at all times. Mental health and wellness, psychological health, ADHD, etc. are real. What recommendations do you have for how to begin the conversation with them?
It's tricky. It is tricky. It is tricky. I think the more that we can stand up, and this is what we're trying to do here today, isn't it? Look at the three of us trying to say, I have ADHD and I'm successful in my field, and this is what it looks like. And I think the more of us that can, and it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to do that. You're putting yourself out there. You're asking for feedback that you might not want. But the more that we can do that, the better. And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, actually, we're all different, aren't we? And some people, we're not all going to agree, and that is healthy, isn't it? It's healthy to have these discussions. So you're not going to get everybody on side, but if you can get the majority of people and turn the tide, then I think that's all we can do. Not everyone's going to agree with us all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jodine said, one suggested, you'll have to wait until I retire. So yeah, I see what you mean. Like, it's one of those things where I'm such a big believer in that change starts with one person, change starts with you. So you being supportive, you having the conversations, you talking about it openly, controlling what you can control. And if you can, spread that wisdom and understanding and openness to others around you, then hopefully there's power in numbers, and there will be enough people that the culture will shift, and that those people will have to either get on board with the culture or they'll be going out the door. That said, as a person who coaches a lot of individuals in the workplace, I get how hard it can be when the practice environment is so much orbiting around those, ex-co-owners or those traditionalist folks that still exist in practice. And so I think it's a slow progress, and something that we just continue to chip away at. Aura asks the question, for those of us with ADHD managing a large group of support staff with ADHD, how do we actually incorporate resources and accommodations into the workplace in a meaningful way? Helen, I'm going to turn this one back over to you as well, because I know that we were talking about, we've talked about this as well, you and I.
Yeah. Can you expand a little bit, whoever asked the question, sorry, what you mean about incorporating it in a useful way? I think having those discussions about where people's traits are with all of staff, in your one-to-one meetings is really useful. I think the knowledge that little adjustments, little tweaks can be a nice place to start, and a very meaningful place to start, and a very useful place to start, kind of makes the task of sort of adjustments in the workplace, I think, can seem daunting, especially for leaders, and it doesn't have to be. A lot of adjustments are free and are small tweaks. A lot of my clients will like to work in one particular consult room, for example, but that's where they've got all their things set up. That's where they've got their stuff. That's where they're familiar. So that's a common reasonable adjustment request. And I don't think that's too hard normally. I think that's quite easy to implement. So I think trying to find out the the small places that you can start is really useful.
Yeah, and I love this idea of being transparent. I think that there's a lot of fear, when we're making accommodations for anybody, whether it's, for mental health reasons or other, protected aspects of a person's, identity and existence. And I think that sometimes we're like, well, we're not allowed to say, so we just kind of have to do these things, and then nobody wants to talk about it. I like Ashley's comment in the chat because she says, I'm an LVT supervisor and have begun to hire new graduates. I have one employee that is only 19, and the younger generation is much more open about neurodivergence as a whole. It's refreshing and has helped me to realize so much about myself. Again, as a mental health advocate, I can't stress this enough. These are just things that we talk about. This is like if somebody came to work and their back was really sore, and it's like, okay, Nancy's not going to be lifting any dogs up on the table this week because she's, nursing this disc in her back or whatever it might be. Like, of course, there's going to be things that people will want to have confidential. And so that is where it's really important as a leader to have those conversations with those individuals. What do they feel comfortable sharing? Do they want to share it? Are they okay with you sharing something that you agree upon, so that we just want to make sure that everybody understands, like, that this is a need that you have, whether that's not having the radio up really loud, in surgery or in the treatment room, or whether it's, having a quiet space to work, or as Helen said, having your own designated exam room. We all need different things. And I'll say it again, for me, even for mental health reasons, like I have things that I need as well. All humans have needs. Like, let's be honest, it doesn't matter who you are. And so let's just be open to that. And I would like to see the conversation shift away from, accommodating individuals, with these challenges, to let's make sure that everybody in the workplace has what they need, because we all have challenges. Again, being as open and transparent, honoring people's confidentiality if that's something that they wish for. But like Ashley said, there's a lot of people that are very open to sharing and really hold this as part of their identity. They're happy for people to know that this is part of who they are. I love that sentiment. Okay, so many questions that I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, but I'm looking over the questions that, okay, never mind. A couple more things just popped up. Liz says, we have developed communities for supporting our team members, and one of them is a well-being, and another a focus group on changing the culture. It takes 20 to 25% of buy-in, and consistently with the language we use and the questions, responses we provide. So started actually from the bottom up. Leadership bought in, admin bought in, so anyone is capable. I love that. So really, yeah, bottom up approach of having these groups within the hospital focused on well-being, focused on culture, and then just kind of spreading like wildfire from there. Aura says, there's no problem with transparency at our practice. Our patient and client care teams have open conversations about our needs and difficulties. I have 2 DVMs who openly acknowledge their ADHD as well. The problem we run into often is competing and incompatible needs. And that's definitely a thing that I've heard of. And I'll turn it over to the group to how you've navigated that. I know a friend of mine actually, who I invited to be on the panel, and she was away at a speaking engagement, as a veterinarian and public speaker who was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, and she still locums in practice, and she's had to stop locuming at certain practices because there's just things in their environment that they're unwilling to change. One of those was the music at one of the hospitals. Like, they just played this music in the overhead speakers, and she was like, I can't get my records done. I can't, like, I've tried earplugs and I've asked them to turn down the music, and because there are individuals at the practice that are like, we're not willing to give up our music. Like, we need the music to go about our day. And so I'll open it up to the panel then. What ideas do you have about managing these competing or incompatible needs?
I think, if you don't mind, I can answer first. Just because I know I've planned my career around this, basically, because that's why I was a locum and a practice owner for most of my career. I've only really worked for someone for a couple instances because of that very thing. it's either music or the way that the appointments are structured or the way, what have you. If it's competing needs, if they won't change, like if they won't accommodate whatever change, or at least work as a team for these things, then it kind of becomes the onus on you to adjust yourself. Because and sometimes that's the way it works. It works best is if you can kind of control your own choices of where, as a locum, or doing like a specialty, or really focusing on what your strengths are. So I think it's really working to your strengths as much as possible, and obviously understanding that other people, and that one of the strengths is empathy. So understanding that there will be competing needs to your own, and how much can you accommodate versus how much you cannot accommodate, and then you have to take control of your own situation by making your own I guess professional development in that sense, like maybe towards a different area. But I think what happens is we kind of get trapped and we don't see those options necessarily. So sometimes it can be just having a conversation and like working on that team communication. And because maybe, the people that had the music up really loud, maybe there's a reason of I guess maybe a more valid reason why they needed to have the music up. And would there be maybe like a middle volume or something? You know what I mean? Like, is there some kind of middle ground? So, exploring those options. And when those options are not an option anymore, then creating your own options, I think.
And I think Aura might be coming at the question from a leadership perspective. How do you manage these competing or incompatible requests from the team? As a workplace communication educator, I would say, this is where getting the team to come together and have this conversation as a group so that they can fully understand the needs that one another have, in addition to the why behind those needs. It's not just that people are trying to be difficult. It's not just like, I don't like your music, turn it down. It's when there's a lot of music in my background, I find it really difficult to concentrate on my records. And then I'm finding that my records are piling up and I'm having to spend 2 hours after the clinic is closed, when it is quiet, to get my records completed. And, this doesn't have to be mean or, angry or anything. It's just speaking to the fact of what it is. And then coming together as a group, now that we have this awareness of one another and what we need. And, I see your need to have background noise, and that keeps you motivated and keeps you awake and energized, or whatever it is. What are the solutions here? Because we've got, recognize what it is, and invite the team to come up with solutions. Whether that's people are using earbuds, or, who knows, separate work environments or workspaces. But I would really, again, if I were, coaching you on this in one of my workplace well-being programs, I would really say this is an opportunity to have the team come together and have a discussion about it, especially those who are really feeling like they're at odds with what one another needs. I wanted to touch on, Helen, this question I had was for you. What resources or support networks have been most beneficial in managing ADHD within the veterinary field? Are there, I know, and Janine, you can maybe speak to your group coaching that you have participated in as well. Obviously, we have the coaching at Reviving Vet Med, and I put that in the chat. There's lots of resources out there. What would everybody recommend?
Yeah, I think so. From a veterinary specific side of things, I don't think there is a lot, unfortunately, and that was what I saw when I was in practice and leading neurodivergent people and being a neurodivergent person myself. And so I've tried to change that. So I have written a lot of blogs, and I've got our website, the Vet Project, which has a lot of resources on there. There's some great Facebook groups. I think it's really nice to have that peer-to-peer support. Veterinary specific ones. There's one called Veterinary Association for Neurodivergence, which is really nice. It's a UK-based one, but obviously it's Facebook, it can be everywhere. Veterinary Spoon Holders is another Facebook group that neurodivergent people and all kind of chronic illness people as well on there. So they're really nice and really supportive, and you can post things on there and veterinary specific, which is really nice. I do think I'm very boring about coaching because I think it's the answer to all of this, which is why I do it. But I do think finding an ADHD coach that can support you to figure out what you need, and having that, I personally think we need that one-to-one kind of human contact. To that is the most valuable resource for me. That's what certainly really helped me in the early days post-diagnosis as well. So yeah, we're trying, aren't we, to make more veterinary specific stuff. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that there's some Facebook groups. That sounds incredibly helpful. There's definitely research to show that Facebook groups can be very helpful, especially because they can offer compassion and validation and normalization and coping strategies sharing. It just can be helpful. I did in the chat for everybody, I put 3 different resources there. So I've got the Vet Life Neurodiversity campaign that was published a couple of years ago by Vet Life. There's several blogs related to ADHD that you could read and or share with your team and have a conversation about. I've also linked up to Helen's The Vet Project, especially for those of you who are leaders and you're looking to, investigate like workplace solutions. Then Helen would be a great contact there. And then we've got Helen's one-on-one coaching through Reviving Vet Med as well. I want to make sure that we touched on, Janine, I know that I asked you when the question came up in the chat about advice for vet students. Do you feel that there's anything else that early career vet professionals or vet students or people contemplating vet school, any advice that you would give them specifically as they think about their long-term career in our profession?
Yeah, I think some of this might be a bit repetitive from some of the things that we've discussed already, but I think that they're important. I think that the self-knowledge and the self-advocacy are going to be really big in figuring out, what works well for you so that you can ensure that you have appropriate accommodations in place. And I think the word accommodation often makes people think of like extra time on tests, but it can be so many different things. It can be wearing noise canceling headphones when you're finishing your records. It can be using a standing workstation instead of sitting at a desk. It can honestly be a lot of things that could be helpful for the team at large. But I think figuring out what works best for you and being a good advocate for yourself. I think practicing self-compassion and self-acceptance and, understanding that we may have some struggles, but we also have some superpowers, and we can figure out how to leverage our superpowers so that we can show up in the best way that we can every day. Movement and exercise and mindfulness and meditation. There's a ton of literature about how those can be really helpful for folks who have ADHD. There's some really interesting research on like elementary school children using standing desks in school and like better classroom behavior and better academic success. So, I mean, things like that seem really small that can be hugely impactful. So I think that there's a lot of self-knowledge and self-advocacy and self-compassion.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Well, I know that we are coming up on the end of our time, and I wanted to leave our discussion today with one final thought from each of our panelists. I'll turn it over to you, Galina, first. What is one change that you would like to see in the veterinary profession to better accommodate and support individuals with ADHD?
I think the first thing is the stigma. So I think that is number one. So because without judgment, then it's easier access to all of these resources, all of these conversations. I think that's number one. And having conversations like this is definitely one of the first steps. So I think this is it. So let's keep talking.
I love that. Helen, what about you?
Unsurprisingly, for me, it would be for workplaces to pay for ADHD coaching for the people that have ADHD. It's so helpful.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And Janine, last but not least, one change you'd like to see in the vet profession to better support individuals with ADHD?
Yeah, I would say normalize talking about it and normalize talking about accommodations and using accommodations in creative ways so they can even be of benefit to other team members.
I love that. Everybody can benefit. Absolutely. Okay. Well, this was wonderful. And I mean, I think we could talk all day about this. Each one of us is very passionate about this. I can see there's a lot of passion in the chat as well from our attendees as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for those of you who were able to attend live and ask questions. Thank you for those of you who are watching the recording. This is available on our YouTube channel indefinitely. So please, please share this with other people. The more people that can gain awareness and understanding by watching this, that will translate into empathy and compassion in the workplace and just more support of everybody all around. So that's what we're hoping for. So thank you again to all of my wonderful panelists, and I wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everybody.